You will need your 2 long strips of hide, these are called welts, and your beadwork, and your 2 soles. We put everything together, nice sides together, so the pen marks are out, and we take the center of that welt line that up with the center of the vamp, and then the center of the sole. So all 3 materials are together. And I just use a binder clip in this video to hold it together. You can use that lock stitch that we used for the liner. Then I'm just lining the welt up with the vamp, and then lining the welt and the vamp up with that side tack line there on the side of the moccasin, and then I use a binder clip again. And then I've got all 3 points tacked down the same way that we did the liner. Then we're going to take out this little back rectangle on your moccasin now. I did forget to mention that before you need to cut out your hide sole the same size that you cut out your liner. So if you cut off 1.5 inches of that liner from that pattern, then you do the exact same on this hide. Don't get rid of this little rectangle, we use it for the welt. Then we're going to start at this center piece. We've got our Glover needle with a piece of sinew on it, and you make sure you wear your thimble, and we go right through all 3 pieces of material. So we go through the vamp, the welt, and the sole, and we do that same lock stitch that we did with the liner. This just is with sinew and a Glover needle. The only thing we're puckering when we're sewing the hide is the sole. You don't want to pucker the welt. The welt and the vamp should line up perfectly. Here I'm taking that sole and puckering it, and I'm stitching just on the outside of that pucker, making sure to catch the vamp, the welt, and the sole. So we go once through, and then we go again in the same spot, wrap it around twice, or 3 times I guess. Pull it through, and then make sure to pull it nice and tight. If you don't pull those stitches nice and tight, when you flip it, you will see the sinew. Again, I'm only puckering the sole, and I'm stitching right on the outside of that welt, going through all 3 pieces of material once, and then again in the same spot, wrap it around twice, pull that through, and then I pull it really nice and tight. I misplaced the clip of me doing that other side, but it's the same as the liner. Once it all matches up, you stop puckering, and I'll show you that in this next clip on the other side. So just flipped it over, and I'm stitching out on the outside of that pucker, going through all 3 materials, making sure to pull it really nice and tight, and then you'll know when you're done puckering when those 3 materials line up like that. So you don't do any more puckering once those 3 pieces of material line up, and you just stitch it all the way down to that little mark. Once you're done, it'll look something like this. It doesn't matter if there's more puckers on one side than the other side, don't worry. Then I just take the back of my scissors and I soften that seam. Next is the back part of the moccasin. We take that little welt that I have and that rectangle that we just cut out, and you line up the ankle part, and then you stick that longer welt in between, And then you just stitch down right to the very edge, making sure to go through right as close as you can to the bottom, as close as you can to that heel part. So then I just flip it over and I sewed up the other side. Then you want to flip that seam and push it out and take your scissors and cut that welt out. And I just run my scissors across the hide. More is better for the first time. If you're not comfortable cutting it, leave more. But you want to make sure you cut off that little piece at that heel part so it is nice and flush. Then you flip that and then you stick the rectangle in there, which I forget to show you, but here it is. And you stitch right on the outside of that seam, making sure to go through all three materials again. So that's that little rectangle that we cut out from before. And we're stitching all the way down, right to that edge there. And then we flip it over and stitch right on the outside of that center seam, doing that exact same lock stitch every time. So once and then again through the same spot and wrapping it around, making sure to pull it tight. So I'm using the back end of my scissors again to soften that seam. Traditionally, our ancestors would use their spit and chew the seams to soften them, but this is commercial hide. Do not chew on this. It has a lot of chemicals. So we'll go ahead and flip it, and then we cut that welt out again, being careful not to cut the actual hide. That's what it'll look like. Then you take your liner and you just shove it right in there. Don't worry if the liner is a little bit taller or the hide is a little bit taller. It will work out. I'll show you how to fix it next week when we put on the fur.